Hey guys, B-Sticks here, go follow me on Instagram. So go cop some of my free mini kits. There is all the stems in there, they're bass midis, so go grab them. You've been asking for this one, and I'm gonna break down the chords of SZA today. We're gonna look at her song Snooze, which has over 1 billion plays on Spotify, crazy numbers. And the cool thing about this song is that it is in C major or A minor, so we can use all the white notes here, so it should be quite straightforward for you. I'm gonna break this down, we're gonna go over to the door, and we're gonna make a sample in a similar kind of vein, and I'm gonna show you loads of tips and tricks and sauce and how we can use these chords to our advantage and make something fire of our own. So let's head to the keyboard now and let's get into it. So we've got the top down view today. SZA's Snooze is in the key of C major or A minor. Now just to recap quickly, that means that all of the white notes are in the scale. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. We've got C being 1, C an octave up being 8 or 1 again. We can see this progression as an ascending progression rising from the 2 chord to the 3 chord to the 4 chord. Now if we look at the chords in C major briefly, if we just make simple triad chords using the 1st, the 3rd and the 5th, we have a C major triad. Now if we skip another note and add another note on top, add a 4th note, we have a C major 7th, this being the major 7th coming before the 1 again. So if we were to play a C major 7th, we get this sound, a very beautiful sound that's very common in R&B. Now, the first chord in Snooze happens to be the 2 chord of the C major scale, which is a D minor. So let's make a D minor triad. It rises up to the 3 chord. Let's make an E minor triad. Let's rise up again to the 4 chord, or F major. So in its simplest form, the progression goes. But it's not exactly like that, because if we add one more note to each chord, we get major or minor 7th. There's our D minor 7th. So we create the D minor 7th chord in exactly the same way that we created the C major 7th. If we now take that and play this, that is our first chord. Our second chord is an E minor 7th. Our third chord is a F major. We can add extra notes if we want. On that F major 7th, I'm adding the D in there. In a nutshell, that is our progression. You notice how it sounds quite bright up here. Well, the SZA song is actually played on guitar, but it's the same principle. So these particular voicings sound nicer, a little bit lower down than the piano. So if we play them down here. Another thing I want to show you briefly is adding this E note on top and keeping it there. It's what we call a pedal tone. Notice how this sounds, and this makes the colours of the chords that much nicer. If we take the chord from up here and put it down here, it sounds a lot warmer, right? So I'm going to add one more note on the top and make that a D major 9 chord. Doesn't that sound really beautiful? Hear that as well? Keeping that E on top, and then we go. Now obviously on the F major 7, that is the major 7 of the F, but I'm going to hold that D down on the F major 7 as well. And that's the major 6th note, so just adding that for that extra colour there. So that sounds really beautiful. So we can experiment with adding notes in. Let's move into Logic and let's try and create something based on this chord movement that we can use in our own samples. So here we are in Logic now, and SZA's Snooze is actually at 143 BPM, but I've taken the tempo up a little bit to 163 BPM and programmed the same chords we were working with, but I've kept that E note on top. So I just chose the Sky Keys About Time preset for this. And if we listen to these chords, you'll notice that I've done a little fill, the end of bar 4 and the end of bar 8. And I'm going to explain to you what I've put in there. And also I'm going to give you one bonus chord that is not in the SZA tune, but I've used, add a little bit more spice to your chord progression. So I'm going to play these chords with the metronome so you can see how I've also given them some rhythm by not playing them on the bar line, but just slightly before the bar line, kind of a pushed feel, like how on the SZA track we get that similar kind of feel. So you can hear that that E note on top gives us a constant pedal tone throughout, grounding our chords. So I've just done a little walk up, which you often hear in R&B, just going from the A, B, C, D, just da 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 da, just kind of preempts the progression starting again. You'll also notice that I've left a bit of space here at bar 4. Now remember, there's going to be vocals, maybe a bass line, doing some fills, etc, in there. Again, as I always say, space is your friend. Use the space, play the space. In fact, from bar 5, I added this note here, this G on top, to just further give us a little bit of top line melody. Then we're sticking with the E, and then on our last chord, I've just put this D in to the F, which, as I showed you on the piano, is the major 6th note of the F chord, and sounds like this. Just gives us a little bit of extra harmony there. Nothing too complicated though. I'm always thinking about, you know, top line songwriting on top. What I've done here on the second half of bar 8 is I'm outlining a C sharp diminished chord. Now, if you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know that before a minor chord in a diatonic scale, so before the D here, or before the A minor, which would be the 6th, or even before the 3rd chord, which is the E minor, we could add a diminished chord. A lot of the notes in the diminished chord want to naturally resolve back to the chord next to it. We can make a C sharp diminished chord before we play a D minor chord. All I've done is I've arpeggiated, which is something that we hear in a lot of SZA tunes. I've arpeggiated the notes of the diminished chord, and a diminished chord is built by stacking minor thirds on top of each other. So we just have the G, the A sharp, the C sharp, and the E note. And if we just arpeggiate them, we get a really nice bit of tension that naturally wants to pull us back to our chord, to our D minor 9 chord, which is in bar 1. And again, I'm setting us back up with that E note that has been constant throughout all of our chords and gives us a nice grounding. Let's briefly look at the processing on this keys. If I take it all off, you'll hear how it sounded initially. I added a Wolf compressor, give it some lo-fi goodness. Microshift for some chorusing. With these two, it's like this. So it's already sounding quite syrupy. Definitely you hear a lot of chorus, a lot of phasing effects in a lot of SZA's music. I then added the phaser. And then just my EQ to carve out some space in the mix for this keyboard. And do you know what actually this progression reminds me of? I don't know if you remember Me, Myself and I, which was a Beyonce tune from way back. And it's got a similar kind of, the way that the chords are pushing, the way that the chord voicing sound, it reminds me of that tune. Go check it out if you don't know it. It's a really great track produced by Scott Storch. I then put a lead sound in, and my processing was very similar to the other sound. Now this preset was the Hammond slide in the lead without any processing. We'll have a look at the MIDI here. So it's just, if I play that with the chords. Very simple melody. I call them nursery rhyme melodies because, again, 2, 3 notes, 4 notes, just keeping them really, really simple, very catchy, very hooky. That's what we want to be doing here. I'm trying to demonstrate complex simplicity. There's some complicated things going on here, but you have to pare it down. You have to tame it a little bit. You don't want to ever do too much. Because if you're doing too much, it's going to be hard for the listener to pick anything out. So this is a song won a Grammy, and it's actually really simple. It's 3 chords. It just, you know, repeats for the whole song pretty much. But what she did on top was just gold, and that's all that matters here, really. You can see my processing on this lead. Bit of shaper box where I'm doing some panning left and right, and some volume automation, almost like side chaining here. My bass, I use my trusty Scarby Rickenbacker, no processing whatsoever here. I pretty much played root notes. I did a few fills here. And in the second half, I developed the bass a little bit more, but we'll get to that soon. Bit of light percussion just to keep us going. Something I want to show you on this percussion, I noticed in the Snooze that it almost sounds like they've pitched the drums down to make them feel even more lazy and sort of dreamy. So what I did with this Linn drum snare, if I just play you this snare on its own now, what I did with that sound is I EQ'd it and I also dropped it in pitch, paired up with this wood block sound. It gives us a little bit of bounce. On the woodblock sound, I just added the Arturia spring reverb. I didn't automate anything here. So if I bring in all of our sounds in the A section now, we have this. I wanted to bring a vocal in to kind of demonstrate to you how this would sound, maybe with a top line melody on top. Pulled in a vocal from Splice.
You and me, I think we're meant to be. I think the stars aligned when you entered my life.
It works, it's simple enough. Top line melody, a song can go over the top. All I've done on this is I put some auto tune, some vintage verb. I'll do a full vocal mixing video, but again, I had to pitch it one semitone up to fit with the song. I changed some formant here to give it a little bit of that modern sound. Then I've done some limiting on it just to level it out, and some EQ, taking out a lot of bottom end there. Now the second half of the sample, I wanted to just change up the vibe a little bit, demonstrate something else you hear in a lot of SZA music, which is an arpeggiator. She uses arps all the time. I just picked this very simple arpeggio, rising arpeggio. 7 repeats of ascending and then 1 descending, and underneath that I put a piano where I just slightly changed some of the voicings of the chords. You have a listen. Again, I love the sound of that. Piano that I'm using is the soft piano in Labs. Go check it out if you haven't got it. Added some Portal onto that piano. So with the bass, I changed up the fills a tiny bit on this second section here. If I play you the bass with the keys and the arp. Powerful thing to use on basses sometimes is to drop a note, an octave, like, so if you play it up a higher octave, a real bass player would do this doom, boom, like that. So I went from the C sharp up here to the C sharp down here. That's a good thing at the end of phrases, just to the next phrase that's coming in, and no processing on the bass. So if I play you the vocal on this second half here.
You and me, I think we're meant to be. I think the stars align when you entered my life.
So something I love to do is put sound shifter on my master, and I just dropped the whole sample down by 3 semitones instead of it being in C major. Now you can see it as being in A major or F sharp minor. Same notes again.
You and me, I think we're meant to be. I think the stars aligned when you entered my life. You and me, I think we're meant to be. I think the stars aligned when you entered my life.
So that's it for today, guys. Thank you for watching, and you guys asked for it. I gave it to you. This was the chords of SZA using Snooze as an example. Go cop my mini kits, and I'll catch you on the next one.